After 2 years of anticipation, the Black Clover movie has finally been released, and there's a lot to talk about, such as things showing up in this movie that anime onlys would not be aware of, and hints towards things that could affect the current story in the manga. Obviously, this review is going to contain some heavy spoilers, so continue watching at your own risk. Okay, so after a very busy 3 days, I finally got to sit down and watch this movie, and this movie was beautiful. The animation, the story, the music, every single thing about it was just simply amazing. Since it had been delayed from its original release date, assumingly to make sure it debuted at its highest possible quality, I went in with some very high expectations for Sword of the Wizard King, and I'm happy to say that it exceeded all of them. I genuinely love this movie, and seeing the rankings that are being shared online, I'm not the only one. In America, as of the recording of this video, the movie is currently sitting in the number 6 spot of the most streamed things on Netflix, while I've seen that in other countries such as Japan, it is currently sitting in the top 3, with most posts showing that it is currently in the number 1 spot in their country. I knew this movie would be popular its opening weekend worldwide, but the amount of support it's getting in Japan as well blew my mind. Though, that being said, the fact that it released on Netflix in Japan at the same time that it released in theaters is sort of a double-edged sword, but we'll get to that later because first I want to talk about the movie itself. The opening scene being the time seal Julius placed on Conrad coming undone was such a smart decision, because at first you think it's just a cool little animation to start off the movie. Then we get into the battle that took place 10 years ago, and we get the context of what that opening actually meant. Which, speaking of the battle, it was nice to see Sister Teresa there as one of the Magic Knights chosen to help take down Conrad, because as we learn later in the movie, Julius chose some of the most elite Magic Knights to help him in the battle, and as a teacher and only person who can instill fear in the future co-captains of the Crimson Lion Kings, it makes sense that she would be chosen, though we didn't get to see her do much. We also didn't get to see much of Kaiser, despite him being involved in both this fight in the past and the first fight in the present day, with the only things we really get to see from him being him getting knocked away. Again. I brought it up in my review for Chapter 362, but man, Tabata must really have something against Kaiser as a character, because he is constantly having him tossed around and just beaten up in every single fight that he's in. We also get to see a younger Yami, Nozel, Fugoyan, and Mario Iona, though no William surprisingly enough, you'd think he would have been there as well. Also, we don't get to see Morgan, but this whole thing could take place after he'd already died, which is a shame because if he had been there, it would have given Nox voice actors a chance to have more lines in this movie besides his mini cameo near the very end. Which, speaking of cameos, we do get a lot of them in this movie, such as Fanzel and Rebecca, characters we haven't seen in a long time, although none of these cameo characters really get any lines throughout the entire thing. Now, you're going to hear me say this a lot during the review, but I wish this battle had been a sequence in the main story, because with the movie being stuck with an hour and 50-minute runtime, we didn't have time to really delve too deep into the fight. Some words were exchanged, a few spells were cast, and then it was pretty much over with Julius sneaking behind Conrad, sealing him and the Imperial Sword before he could finish his plan. It was a good sequence as far as flashbacks go, I just wish there was a little bit more to it. And honestly, that was my only complaint about this movie, that I wish the story had actually been an arc in the anime and manga. That way we could have delved more into the backstory of each of these new characters, and get to see more of the fights. But if you walk away from an anime movie wanting to see more of it, that just means that the story was that engaging. And it was, because even if that opening flashback was not enough to get you invested, the very next sequence will, as we cut back to the present day and head straight into a tournament where we are teased at finally seeing Yuno and Asta face off. Of course, we don't actually get to see a full fight, that's being saved for the end of the manga, but just the idea that we might open the movie with a quick battle between these two Wizard King contenders had me on the very edge of my seat. And when their fight gets interrupted and we get introduced to the 4 main antagonists of the movie, seeing Asta be the very first one to rush out to save civilians in danger made me realize just how much I missed seeing his fights animated. Also, seeing Noel be the one to back him up when he's outnumbered by the enemy soldiers was a sweet moment between the two of them, reminding us just how much these two trust each other, and how their first instinct when one of them is in trouble is to go to their rescue. And this is all reinforced a few scenes later when Noel has her magic stolen by Conrad. Even when Asta was being bloody and could barely move, his main focus was getting back her stolen magic. And then again later on when Asta is trying to convince the remaining Magic Knights to continue fighting instead of running away to the Heart Kingdom, Noelle, despite having no access to her spells, is the first one to stand with him. The movie really shined to me when it was focusing on the dynamic between these two, which is not something we manga fans need to be reminded of. But for you anime onlys, it's been about 2 years since we got to see these characters interact with each other, so it was a nice thing to remind you guys of. And their dynamic of being a peasant who wants to become the Wizard King and a member of the royal family also helps in adding more depth to the overall plot of the movie. Because the main goal behind the four former Wizard Kings is to remake the kingdom into one that is not corrupted, where nobles and royals don't discriminate against commoners, and where everyone is equal. They plan to achieve this by killing everyone and then reviving those they deem worthy of living, but still, the point is that they, especially Conrad, have the same overall ideals as Asta. The movie even makes us immediately aware of the similarities between Asta and Conrad by having Conrad's last words before Julie steals them being Asta's trademark, "My magic is never giving up." Conrad is essentially Asta if he had went down a dark path after losing everyone he loved, which again, I wish the movie had been an arc in the manga and anime, so that we could actually dive into the flashbacks for each of the Wizard Kings, because we do get enough to figure out what the gist of their story was and why they rebelled against the kingdom. I just wish we got to see more of it. But getting back to why Asta and Noelle's dynamics work so well with this story, it's very clear throughout the entire movie that the former Wizard Kings all hate royals. And just like how at the end of the movie, Conrad in his final moments realizes that Asta was right all along, Noelle manages to convince Edward that not all nobles and royals are corrupt, supporting Asta's ideal of a future where everyone can laugh and smile together despite social standing. And it's not just the two of them that manage to turn around their opponents. Marileona manages to do essentially the same thing to Priscilla by giving her the toughest fight of her two lives. Oh, and by the way, their fight was definitely my favorite out of the four, and when Marileona went into Hellfire Incarnate, I literally jumped out of my chair in excitement. I was not expecting to see that in this movie. I was also not expecting a fight where we get to see Yuno, Yami, Fugoyan, and Nozel all team up to be my least favorite fight of the entire movie. Not that it wasn't a good fight, it was just one that kind of fell short when compared to the other ones. Especially when one of the fights involves Asta having an Avatar the Last Airbender moment, with the previous Wizard Kings gifting him godlike powers in order to fight Conrad in space. And that last scene of Asta just floating there in space after defeating Conrad was just simply beautiful. Best shot of the entire movie. At this point, I'm trying to find something negative I could say about the movie to even out all the praise I'm giving it, but there was just so much good about this movie that I really wasn't expecting. Like the fact that we get to see the Black Bull base turn into a freaking jet. I didn't think we get to see the Megazord at all in this movie, let alone seeing it do that. I also didn't expect to see Sally in the movie, but here she is, and I definitely love it. And you know what? The movie really keeps up the series tradition of making sure to share the screen time and to give everyone a chance to do something. Even the no-name Magic Knights got to play a vital role in this movie. Though I guess that could be the negative thing I have to say about this movie. Half of the captains don't really get to do much. I mean, they all do end up helping out in their own way, even Kaiser does. And there's only really 4 enemies for them to fight against, so it does make sense that most of them will have to take a back seat in this movie. So, I guess even that I really can't knock the movie for. Last thing I want to mention, when Haruka Mirai started playing during Asta's fight, it made me realize just how much I miss this anime, and how important it is for this movie to do well if we ever want the anime to return. Which, if we were going off of just the opening weekend box office numbers in Japan, it seemed like the anime is still far from being brought back. But with how well it's doing on Netflix worldwide, and Netflix trying their hardest to get their foot in the door of the anime market, I can definitely see them pushing for the return of the anime, streamed exclusively by them, and while Netflix hasn't had the best track record over the past 2 years of releasing anime on their site, it would still be better than nothing. Anyway, overall, I'd give the movie a solid 9.5 out of 10. The animation, story, and music were all nearly perfect, and I definitely plan on watching the movie multiple more times over the next few days. But let me know down below what your thoughts on the movie are, and if you think it doing so well on Netflix could finally lead to the anime making its grand return.